The first time Lieutenant Aaron Kessler saw one of the Cathari vessels, he thought it looked less like a ship and more like a cathedral built by mathematicians. Its hull stretched in sharp angles, black metal latticed with glowing seams of pale green light. It drifted above the burned-out shell of an asteroid colony, silent and regal, almost contemptuous in its stillness. The humans who had lived there were gone, most evacuated, some slaughtered when evacuation was not fast enough. Aaron stood on the bridge of the frigate Resolute, staring at the image projected on the forward screen. Around him, the crew worked with the quiet, taut efficiency of those who knew panic would get them killed. The Cathari ship had not moved in hours. It did not need to. It was waiting. Observing, judging, "They could burn us from this distance," muttered Ensign Callan at the sensor station. His voice carried a sharp edge of fear that he did not quite mask. "Why don't they?" Commander Harrow, the ship's captain, leaned forward in her chair. Her hair was silver at the roots, though she was no older than 40, her face carved into lines from decades of long deployments. "Because they already won this fight," she said. "They are watching us scramble, tallying our probabilities, running their models. When they are satisfied, they will finish it." Aaron swallowed. He had studied the Cathari since the first contact reports 2 years ago. Every military academy cadet had. The aliens were not warriors in the traditional sense. They were something stranger, scholars. Analysts, a civilization built on endless calculation, where conflict was approached as an intellectual proof rather than a contest of wills. The term that had caught on among the crews was cruel in its simplicity, alien nerds, but there was no mockery in the nickname anymore. Humanity was bleeding out in the stars, and the Cathari were the ones wielding the scalpel. "Orders, Commander?" Aaron asked. His voice came out steadier than he felt. Harrow's eyes did not leave the screen. "We run silent. The fleet is regrouping behind Kepri's moon. If they believe we are broken and scattered, they will not commit their core forces yet. That buys time." Time, that was the word everyone used, though no one knew what it was worth. Time for the fleet to reorganize, time for new weapons to be tested. Time for Earth to decide whether the war was survivable at all. Aaron watched the projection as minutes stretched into hours. The alien ship did not stir. Its glowing seams pulsed in irregular rhythms, like the breathing of some great animal. Callan dozed at his station, eyelids fluttering. Harrow's knuckles stayed white around the armrest of her chair. When the movement came, it was almost imperceptible. The Cathari vessel rotated, a long arc that brought its angular prow to face Resolute. Aaron's heart slammed into his throat. "They see us," he whispered. The first volley came not as fire but as numbers. Data surged into Resolute systems, bypassing firewalls, carving through encryption. The Cathari always attacked this way first, digitally, with logic bombs and recursive code structures designed to unmake their enemies' systems before a shot was fired. The lights on the bridge flickered, consoles blaring with corrupted input. "Kill the feeds," Harrow barked. Aaron tore his hands across his station, severing external connections, isolating the ship's systems. One by one, the alarms dulled. The bridge dimmed to emergency red. The next strike would be physical. "Brace," Harrow said. A beam of green light seared across the void. It did not strike Resolute directly. It carved a perfect line across the hull of the drifting colony debris, splitting metal and stone alike with surgical precision. A warning shot. The Cathari were announcing that they had finished their calculations. Aaron's chest tightened. He thought of Earth, of his sister back in the urban sprawl of New Rotterdam, of the message she had sent before his deployment. Come back alive, not heroic, just alive. He had not answered. He had not known what to say. "Engines at full burn," Harrow ordered. "Get us behind the rock. We do not fight them here." Resolute lurched as thrusters roared. The enemy ship did not pursue. It simply turned its hull again, rotating with eerie calm, watching. Aaron's palms were slick as he gripped the console. He realized with sudden clarity that the Cathari were not fighting battles in the way humans understood. They were solving equations, and humans were just variables. To them, the war was not about conquest or hatred. It was about demonstration, proof of superiority, and humanity was losing the proof. The escape burned through half of Resolute's remaining fuel reserves. They limped to Kepri's moon and rejoined what was left of the Third Fleet. 29 ships had gone into the defense of the colony. 11 made it out. Aaron stepped onto the hangar deck after shift and inhaled the sharp tang of fuel, sweat, and scorched metal. Repair crews moved like ants across the broken hulls of frigates and destroyers, welding, patching, dragging away bodies under tarps. No one spoke louder than necessary. Silence clung to the fleet like a shroud. He found Lieutenant Miriam Zhao sitting on a supply crate near the rear bulkhead. She was younger than him by 3 years, hair cropped short, her hands trembling as she stripped a rifle for cleaning, not because it needed it, because it was something to do. "You made it," she said when she saw him, her voice cracked on the words. "Barely," Aaron admitted. He sat beside her. For a moment they both watched the crews working. Sparks fell in showers from the belly of a corvette where armor was being welded back into place. "They're not fighting us," Miriam said quietly. "Not really. We are like a test case for them. They just want to see how far they can push us before we break." Aaron wanted to argue, but he could not. He had seen the precision of the green beam, the way it cut the asteroid apart not for destruction, but for demonstration. He had seen the calm way the Cathari ship rotated, like a scholar turning a page. "They think we're predictable," Aaron said finally. Miriam snorted without humor. "Maybe we are." They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the clang of tools and the hiss of torches. Admiral Selene Vey arrived 3 days later. Her flagship descended into the dockyards like a storm cloud, battleship hull pitted and scarred but unbroken. When she walked into the command hall, officers rose without needing orders. She was tall, her face worn and severe, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had stared at the abyss too long and refused to blink. "We are not finished," she said. No preamble, no speech about duty or sacrifice, just those 4 words, flung like iron into the room. Aaron stood at the back with the other junior officers, watching as the Admiral laid out the situation. The Cathari had overrun 3 colonies in the last month. Their projections suggested Earth itself would be within strike range inside of a year if the line did not hold. Humanity's weapons could hurt them, yes, but rarely kill, never decisively. For every alien vessel destroyed, 5 human ships were lost. The balance could not last. "We will not match them in logic," Vey said. "We will not match them in calculation, but they bleed same as us. And if they bleed, they can be beaten." The room was silent. No one spoke the doubts that hung in the air. Aaron clenched his fists. He wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her. But in the back of his mind, he could still see the alien vessel turning with perfect calm, its pale light pulsing like the heartbeat of some greater mind. Later that night, alone in his bunk, Aaron opened the last message from his sister again. "Just alive," she had written. He stared at the words until his eyes blurred. He wondered if humanity had it in them to survive being treated like an equation. And he wondered what it would take to prove the aliens wrong. The first battle Aaron fought after Kepri was in orbit of a gas giant called Hava. The Cathari had already claimed 2 of its moons, and the fleet had been ordered to hold the remaining stations at all costs. Command knew it was futile, everyone did, but still the orders came. They had to slow the advance, bleed the enemy where they could, and prove that humanity would not vanish quietly. Resolute hung among the shattered rocks of Hava's outer rings. The bridge air was sharp with the smell of recycled oxygen and nervous sweat. Every console glowed red from dimmed lighting, so no external scanners could pick them out against the ring's reflection. Outside, fragments of ice and stone tumbled endlessly, colliding, breaking apart, reforming. It was a graveyard in motion, and they were hiding in it. "They will find us," Callan muttered under his breath. His eyes flicked over his screens, as though speed-reading the inevitable. "They already have," Harrow said, voice flat. She had not slept in 2 shifts. The hollows beneath her eyes were dark, her lips pale, but her hands on the armrest of her chair were steady. "They just have not decided what to do with us yet." The Cathari ships emerged from the black like blades unsheathed. 3 of them, their geometry angular and precise, their glowing seams shifting rhythmically as they scanned. Aaron's breath caught when he saw the formation, a perfect triangle, vertices aligned with mathematical precision. The alien vessels did not drift, did not sway in gravitational pull. Their movements were too exact, as if the laws of physics bent a fraction to accommodate them. Orders? Aaron asked. Harrow's eyes narrowed. We wait. Wait. Always waiting, always the ones reacting. It gnawed at him. When the strike came, it was brutal and clean. A single beam from the lead Cathari vessel lanced through the ring field, cutting a corvette in half. The debris spun silently as bodies and burning atmosphere vented into the void. Aaron's console lit up with signals from the rest of the fleet, retreat vectors, broken comms, last screams of static. Now, Harrow said, engage. Resolute's cannons roared. Plasma fire streaked across the void, slamming into the nearest alien hull. For a heartbeat, Aaron thought it had worked. The Cathari ship rocked, its pale seams flickering. Then the glow stabilized, and the enemy returned fire. Green beams cut through the dark, each one precise, surgical. A destroyer vanished in a blossom of flame. Another ship was gutted stem to stern. Aaron worked frantically at his station, overriding targeting systems, forcing them to fire irregular patterns. Predictable salvos were suicide. If the Cathari could be surprised, it would not be through strength, it would be through chaos. Manual firing sequence engaged, he shouted. Harrow nodded once. Do it. Resolute's guns shifted, hammering out wild bursts of plasma in seemingly random arcs. The alien ship's shields faltered, confused by the lack of a solvable pattern. For the first time, Aaron felt a flicker of triumph. Then another green beam slammed into their flank. The bridge shook. Consoles exploded in sparks. Miriam's voice crackled over the intercom from weapons control. Port batteries gone. We cannot sustain this. Harrow's jaw clenched. Pull us back. They limped out of the fight, the rest of the fleet scattering like insects before fire. Out of 22 ships that had gone in, only 9 retreated. Another massacre. Later, in the mess hall, Aaron sat across from Miriam. She had a bandage on her cheek where shrapnel had grazed her. She stirred her ration paste with a spoon without eating. Around them, the hall was half empty. Too many bunks had gone silent after Hava. They knew exactly where we would be, Miriam said softly, exactly how we would fight. We are not soldiers to them. We are equations, and they keep solving us. Aaron pushed his tray away. The smell of the food made his stomach twist. Equations can be broken, proofs can fail. She looked at him, tired eyes narrowing. And how do you propose we do that? By firing randomly until one of us gets lucky? Maybe, Aaron said. He could hear how desperate it sounded, but he did not care. Maybe luck is the one thing they cannot account for. Miriam shook her head, but she did not argue further. Admiral Vey called a briefing 2 days later. The command hall was packed with surviving officers, faces gaunt and drawn. The Admiral stood before them, her hands clasped behind her back, a holographic display of the Cathari front burning behind her. They believe we are broken, she said. That is the only reason we still live. They think us predictable, bound by patterns of logic they can master. That is their strength, and it must become our weapon. The room was silent. They expect us to fight with strategy. We will fight with madness. They expect us to act as fleets. We will act as wolves. We will scatter, strike where they do not predict, vanish before they can recalculate. We will give them problems that have no solutions. Murmurs rippled, some skeptical, some hungry for any plan that was not another slow death. Aaron felt something stir in his chest. For the first time in months, he saw a path that was not simply retreat. The plan unfolded across the next week. Resolute was assigned to a 3-ship wolf pack with the frigate Iron Hound and the destroyer Dawnfire. Their mission, ambush a Cathari supply convoy that had been mapped moving between occupied moons. It was suicide, Aaron knew, but at least it was a suicide of their own choosing. As the ship slipped into silent drift among the asteroids, Aaron found himself pacing the bridge. His heart hammered, not with fear, but with something sharper. They will not expect this, Miriam said beside him, her fingers drumming the console. They will, Aaron replied, but maybe not fast enough. The convoy appeared on the edge of the field, 3 massive carriers escorted by 2 triangular warships. Their formations were perfect, their motions seamless. The sight of them made Aaron's skin crawl. Harrow raised her hand. On my mark. The moment stretched. Then, now. The wolf pack struck. Plasma fire blazed out of the asteroid field, tearing into the lead carrier. The convoy reeled, their formation collapsing as they scrambled to respond. For the first time, Aaron saw hesitation in the Cathari maneuvers, not much, but enough. Ironhound's torpedoes slammed into a carrier's flank, ripping open its hull. Dawnfire darted between the escorts, her guns spitting fire. Hit them again, Harrow shouted. Resolute surged forward, plasma cannons hammering the wounded carrier until it split apart in a flare of white fire. Aaron's throat caught. They had killed one. For the first time they had killed one outright, but victory was never clean. A green beam lanced across space, catching Dawnfire amidships. The destroyer convulsed in flame and silence. Another beam raked across Ironhound, gutting her engines. Pull back, Harrow snapped. Resolute dove into the asteroid field, debris smashing against her hull as they fled. Behind them, the convoy burned, one carrier destroyed, another crippled. It was not a victory, but it was not a defeat either. For the first time, the Cathari had bled more than they had. That night, the fleet did not mourn in silence. They drank what little alcohol they had, they sang in voices hoarse and raw, they pounded fists on tables, not for Dawnfire, not for Ironhound, for the single alien ship that had died screaming. Aaron sat with Miriam, the noise around them deafening. Her eyes glistened as she raised her glass. To unpredictability, she said. Aaron clinked his cup against hers. To humanity. For the first time since the war began, the word did not feel hollow. By morning, the hangover had set in, and so had reality. Their ship was scarred, their allies dead, and the Cathari would adapt. But still, something had shifted. Aaron looked out the viewport at the distant stars and thought, maybe the proof could fail after all. The next campaign began with promises and ended with smoke. After the ambush at Hava, the High Command believed momentum could be seized. Strike teams were dispatched to harass convoys, sabotage supply depots, and raid occupied stations. For 3 months, the wolf packs hunted in the shadows of asteroid belts and nebulae, darting in and out of Cathari formations like knives in the dark. They won small victories, killed escorts, crippled convoys. But for every wound they inflicted, the Cathari adjusted. Patterns emerged. Human tactics that once worked began failing with eerie precision, as though the aliens had not only studied the battles, but anticipated the very creativity that had fueled them. It was as though the Cathari were no longer reacting, but running ahead of them, solving the problem before it could be posed. By the 4th month, the wolves had become the hunted. Resolute was caught in a trap near the binary stars of Nakara. Aaron sat strapped to his console, sweat dripping into his eyes as alarms howled around him. The bridge lurched under another impact, sparks raining from ceiling panels. Shields gone, Miriam's voice screamed over comms. Hull breach on decks 3 and 4. On the forward screen, 3 Cathari warships glowed like blades in the twin starlight, cutting arcs of green through the void. Every time the humans tried to scatter, the aliens drove them back together, shepherding them like cattle to slaughter. They knew, Aaron choked out. His hands flew over controls, forcing power to maneuvering thrusters. They knew exactly what we would do before we even, the ship convulsed. A console beside Callan exploded, throwing him across the deck in a spray of blood. Port engines down, an ensign screamed. Harrow sat rigid in her chair, her voice cutting through the chaos with steel. We fight until we cannot, then we ram. Aaron's throat closed. They had talked about this in briefings, but hearing it aloud was different. Suicide charges against Cathari hulls were the last recourse, a way to trade one human life for one alien ship. Target nearest vessel, Harrow ordered. Aaron's fingers hovered. He thought of his sister, of the promise he had not given her. He thought of Miriam somewhere deep in the ship, fighting to keep the guns alive. Then the ship shook again. A green beam ripped across the prow, carving through metal like paper. "Forward batteries gone," someone shouted. Aaron looked at Harrow. She did not flinch. "Ramming speed," she said quietly. They never reached the alien ship. At the last moment, a flare of light erupted on the battlefield as reinforcements dropped out of slip space, 3 battleships and their escorts. Admiral Vey's flagship led the charge, guns blazing. The Cathari ships shifted, their precise triangle disrupted. For the first time in the battle, they withdrew, not in panic, but in cold, deliberate calculation. The proof had been solved. The humans were no longer worth the casualties. Resolute drifted broken among the debris. In the aftermath, the fleet tallied its losses. 17 ships destroyed, thousands dead. Another system abandoned. Aaron sat on the medbay floor beside Miriam's cot. She was pale, her right arm swathed in bandages where shrapnel had torn through it. Her eyes fluttered open, found him, and managed a weak smile. "You look worse than me," she whispered. Aaron barked a laugh that came out broken. "You should see Callan." Her smile faded. Callan had not survived the blast. Silence hung between them. Finally, Miriam said, "We cannot keep doing this. We are running out of ships, out of people." Aaron wanted to argue, but he could not. He had watched too many names vanish from the roster, too many bunks left empty. Admiral Vey addressed the survivors a week later. The command hall was nearly empty compared to the first time Aaron had stood there. Too many faces gone. The Admiral's voice carried through the hollow space like a hammer striking iron. "They are not gods," she said. "They are scholars pretending to be gods. And like all scholars, they believe they have the final word. They believe they have already written the proof of our extinction. They are wrong. But we must prove them wrong with blood." Her eyes swept the room, pausing on each officer as though burning their faces into memory. "The next operation will be costly. We will strike at their staging hub near the Auden Rift. If we succeed, we cut their advance in half. If we fail, we may not have another chance." No one cheered. No one saluted with zeal. They simply nodded, hollow-eyed, resigned. Aaron felt a weight settle on him like lead. He knew what was coming. The assault on Auden Rift was the closest thing to hell he had ever seen. Hundreds of ships clashed in the turbulent gravity well of the rift, plasma and beams carving across the void. The rift itself pulled at everything, dragging wreckage into its maw. Explosions lit the darkness like dying stars. Aaron shouted orders until his throat was raw, hands blistered from hot controls. Miriam stood at his shoulder, blood soaking through the bandages on her arm, refusing to leave her station. Harrow barked commands with the calm of a woman who had already accepted her death. The Cathari formations were flawless, carving through human lines with mathematical elegance. For every alien vessel destroyed, 10 humans fell. Resolute's hull screamed as beams tore across it. Fires roared through the corridors. Men and women burned alive in sealed compartments, their screams echoing through the comms until the systems cut out. Aaron saw Ironhound's wreckage drift past, then Dawnfire. Too many ghosts, too much loss. At last, Vey's flagship was struck. A green beam split the battleship down its spine. The Admiral's final transmission carried across all channels, proved them wrong. Then the ship detonated, vanishing in light. Hours later, the battle was over. The humans had been broken. Only a handful of ships limped away. The Auden Rift was lost. The Cathari advance would continue unchecked. On Resolute, Aaron stumbled through smoke-filled corridors, half-deaf from the ringing in his skull. Bodies lay twisted in the passageways. The air reeked of burnt metal and flesh. He found Miriam slumped against a bulkhead, her uniform blackened with soot. She was still breathing, barely. "We lost," she whispered. Aaron knelt beside her, gripping her hand. His throat was raw, his eyes burning. Not yet. Her gaze found his. There was no hope in her eyes, only exhaustion. "How many times do we have to prove we are alive before it matters?" Aaron had no answer. The war was not over, but something inside humanity had shattered at Auden Rift. The Cathari had not just won a battle, they had broken the rhythm of survival itself. And yet, as Aaron held Miriam's trembling hand, he felt a stubborn ember in his chest. Maybe survival was not a proof to be solved. Maybe it was defiance itself. The weeks after Auden Rift were like wandering through the ruins of a burned city. The fleet was a ghost of itself. Ships that returned from the battle limped into hidden docks with hulls torn open, decks scorched, crews reduced to half strength or less. The chain of command was shattered. Most of the admirals and senior captains were gone. For the first time since the war began, whispers spread that Earth might sue for peace, though everyone knew the Cathari would not accept it. There was nothing to negotiate. Resolute sat in orbit of a barren moon, repairs dragging on with stripped parts and exhausted crews. The ship groaned under patchwork plates and jury-rigged systems. Every time Aaron walked her corridors, he thought of the names that should have filled them: Callan, the gunners on Deck 4, the medics who had burned alive when the bay collapsed. The ship itself felt haunted. Miriam recovered slowly. Her arm was ruined, muscles shredded beyond full repair, but she refused to be reassigned. Aaron often found her in the weapons bay, leaning against consoles, giving orders with her good hand. She carried herself like a soldier held together by will alone. One night, when the hum of the generators was the only sound, she said, "We are losing because we keep playing their game." Aaron frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked at him, eyes hard in the low light. "Strategy, formations, predictions, all of it. We fight like they do, order against order, but we cannot outthink them on their terms. We have to stop thinking like soldiers and start thinking like," she hesitated, "like humans." Aaron leaned against the bulkhead. He knew what she meant. Humans were messy, illogical. Driven by things the Cathari could not measure: fear, grief, anger, stubbornness, qualities the aliens probably considered weaknesses. "What does that look like in a battle?" Aaron asked. Miriam gave a thin smile. "I do not know, but maybe it means not doing what makes sense." Their idea spread like a fever. With the admirals gone, command fell to captains and lieutenants who had nothing left to lose. They began experimenting. Skirmishes fought with erratic maneuvers, ships breaking formation at random, wolf packs turning on their own convoys to bait pursuit. What little intelligence they had suggested the Cathari were struggling to adapt. Their logic webs predicted responses that no longer happened. Their proofs unraveled in the face of chaos. Aaron became part of the experiments. Resolute was sent on raids deep into occupied systems, striking targets that no rational commander would choose. Sometimes they hit fuel depots. Sometimes they attacked empty stations. Once, they dropped out of slipspace just long enough to fire into empty void before vanishing again. It made no sense, and that was the point. The Cathari wasted resources chasing ghosts. The victories were small. But they were victories. The first true turning point came at the belt of Aridus. The Cathari had established a mining hub among the asteroids, guarded by 4 warships. By all calculations, it was suicide to attack, which was exactly why Resolute and 3 other frigates were sent. They arrived silent, drifting among the rocks, hiding their signatures. Instead of striking the hub directly, they targeted the asteroids around it, firing charges into weak points until massive stones broke free and tumbled through the field. The aliens responded with their usual precision, carving the rocks apart with beams, until one of the charges detonated late, sending fragments ricocheting into a warship's flank. The frigates struck then, guns blazing, weaving between tumbling stone. Aaron shouted until his throat bled, hands slick on the controls as he forced the targeting systems into erratic bursts. Miriam guided the guns with her good arm, ignoring the blood that seeped through her bandages. The Cathari tried to form their perfect triangles, but the shifting asteroids broke their lines, turning elegance into chaos. One warship was crippled, another lost. When the humans withdrew, battered but alive, Aaron felt something new pulsing in his chest. Not triumph, never triumph, but proof of something else. The aliens could be broken. After Aridus, the survivors began calling themselves the Disorder. It was a name born in whispers, spreading through crews who had seen too much death. Disorder meant refusing to play the game by rules. Disorder meant surviving by being unsolvable. Aaron saw it in every mission. Ships darted unpredictably, captains made choices that defied reason, and somehow, impossibly, they began to win more often than they lost. Not because they were stronger, not because they were smarter, but because the Cathari did not understand what it meant to be irrational. Still, every victory had a price. Resolute returned from Aridus with a third of her crew dead. Repairs dragged on with scrap metal and salvaged wiring. The mess hall was quieter each week. One evening, Aaron and Miriam sat alone at a table, untouched rations cooling between them. "Do you think we are turning it around?" she asked. Aaron thought of the wreckage fields, the burning ships, the silence of dead comrades. He thought of Admiral Vey's last words, "Prove them wrong." "We are still alive," he said finally. "That is something." Miriam's eyes searched his, looking for more, but he had no more to give. Word reached them months later that Earth itself had narrowly survived a probing assault. Civilian panic was spreading. Entire colonies were abandoning their worlds, fleeing into deep space to vanish from maps. Humanity was not winning. At best, they were refusing to die neatly, but refusal had become enough. Aaron stood on the observation deck one night, staring at the stars. He thought of the Cathari, cold and calculating, watching every move as though the war were a theorem to be proven. He wondered if somewhere, in their halls of logic, they were frustrated. Did they argue over the contradictions humans kept throwing at them? Did they rage at the impossibility of fitting chaos into equations? The thought made him smile for the first time in months. If the aliens wanted a proof, humanity would give them a paradox instead. The next orders came down, a full counterstrike, not a defense, not a raid. A strike at the heart of a Cathari staging fleet near the Arkan Nebula. The risk was immense. The probability of success was slim, which, Aaron thought grimly, was exactly why they might have a chance. The Arkan Nebula was a graveyard waiting to be filled. From a distance it looked beautiful. Vast clouds of violet gas, veined with streaks of pale blue and green, lit by the faint shimmer of a dying star at its center. But inside the cloud, the gases twisted sensors into useless noise, static flooded comms, and ships could vanish a kilometer away without trace. It was the perfect staging ground for the Cathari, mathematical masters of control, operating in a place where human eyes and machines faltered. And that was why the Disorder had chosen it. Resolute hung in the shadows of the nebula alongside 30 other human ships. It was the largest force Aaron had seen since Auden Rift, though even now it looked ragged, patched hulls, mismatched weapons, crews exhausted and thin. They were not a fleet. They were survivors stitched together by desperation. On the bridge, Harrow addressed them with the same flat calm she always carried. "We strike their supply fleet here. We do not match them ship for ship. We do not match them in firepower. We win because we are willing to be chaos. Remember that. No formations, no patterns, no expectations. We fight like humans, not proofs." Aaron glanced at Miriam at the weapons console. Her jaw was tight, her eyes hollow. She had not slept properly in days, but her hands rested steady on the triggers. He turned back to his station. His palms were slick, his heart hammering, but for once it was not fear. It was anticipation. The enemy arrived in silence. 7 Cathari warships slid into the nebula like black blades through smoke, their seams glowing pale green, their movements aligned with unnatural precision. Behind them drifted the bulk of their supply fleet, carriers and tankers heavy with resources that kept their advance alive. Aaron felt his stomach tighten. The logic was simple. If they destroyed the supplies, the enemy advance slowed. But simple logic meant the Cathari had already calculated the risk. They were waiting for them. "Scatter," Harrow said. The human ships split apart like shattered glass, diving into the nebula. Plasma fire lit the gas clouds in brilliant flashes, carving silhouettes of destruction across the dark. The Cathari responded instantly, forming perfect triangles, beams slicing into the mist. Aaron's console screamed with damage reports. A corvette was gutted in seconds, its wreckage vanishing into the cloud. Another frigate exploded into a ball of fire, swallowed by violet smoke. "Keep moving," Harrow barked. "Do not let them solve you." Aaron fed random vectors into the navigation, thrusters jerking the ship into unpredictable bursts. Miriam fired in erratic salvos, never letting the pattern repeat. A green beam slashed past their prow, missing by meters. Aaron's chest lurched with adrenaline. "Target that supply ship," Harrow snapped. Miriam's guns thundered. Plasma streaked into the darkness, exploding against the hull of a carrier. The ship staggered, wounded but still intact. Then, from the clouds, another frigate emerged, Dawnfire's replacement, a ship Aaron barely knew. It rammed straight into the crippled carrier, detonating in a white flare that split the alien vessel in two. Aaron's throat caught. Suicide runs were madness, and yet in this madness, the Cathari faltered. Their triangles broke as they scrambled to recalculate. "Hit them again," Harrow shouted. Resolute surged forward, guns blazing. Another supply ship caught fire, spilling debris into the nebula. The battle became chaos incarnate. Human ships darted in and out of clouds, firing at random, retreating into gas, appearing again in places no algorithm could predict. Suicide charges tore holes in the enemy lines. Carriers burned, tankers shattered. The Cathari struck back with merciless precision, cutting down ship after ship. Aaron watched friends vanish from the roster in bursts of static and flame. But for every human lost, another alien vessel reeled, another supply line torn open. At last, through the haze, Aaron saw it, the Cathari formation collapsing. The remaining warships began to withdraw, their proofs broken, their calculations unraveling under the weight of disorder. A roar went up across the comms. Broken, hoarse, but unmistakable. Humanity had not won the war. But here in the Arkan Nebula, they had won a battle. The victory was not clean. When Resolute limped from the cloud, half her hull was torn open. Fires still smoldered in the corridors. The hangar was filled with the bodies of those they could not save. Aaron staggered through the wreckage, numb. The celebration on the comms had already faded. Victory meant survival, nothing more. He found Miriam in the medbay, her arm strapped into a sling, blood crusted along her neck. She looked at him with tired eyes. "Did we do it?" she asked. Aaron sat beside her, exhaustion crushing him. "We slowed them. We proved they can bleed." She exhaled, leaning back against the cot. "That is enough." Aaron did not answer. He thought of the ships that had rammed, the crews that had never come back. Was it enough? Weeks later, the reports came in. The Cathari advance had stalled. Their supply chains were stretched thin. The Arkan strike had forced them to regroup. For the first time in 2 years, the maps showed not just red lines pressing forward, but space where the advance had stopped. Hope was too fragile a word, but there was something like it. Aaron stood on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. He thought of Admiral Vey's last words, carried in his memory like a wound. Prove them wrong. Maybe they had begun to, but he knew it was not over. The Cathari would adapt. They always adapted. And the next battle would be harder. In the silence of the stars, Aaron whispered to himself, "Then we will be harder too." The months after Arkan was stolen time. The Cathari advance had slowed, but no one believed it would last. Humanity's ragged fleets scattered into hidden shipyards, patching their hulls with whatever metal they could scavenge, rebuilding weapons from broken parts. Every victory report was followed by casualty lists longer than the celebration. On Resolute, the crew carried their scars openly. Aaron walked the corridors each day and saw the hollow-eyed survivors, many too young, pressed into service to replace the dead. They whispered about their dead comrades, about home worlds burned, about whether Earth itself could survive another year. But in the midst of exhaustion, there was a new kind of resolve. They had proved the Cathari could bleed. Now the question was whether they could be broken. The answer came in fragments of intercepted transmissions. The aliens were preparing something vast, a concentration of force unlike anything seen before. A single decisive strike to end the war, aimed not at Earth itself, but at the system of Solara Prime, a keystone in the web of human colonies. If Solara fell, the supply routes to Earth would collapse. Humanity would be choked out, starved before they could rebuild. Command sent out the order. Every ship that could still fight was to gather. It was not a strategy. It was a gamble with the species at stake. Aaron stood in the hangar as the crew prepared for departure. He watched engineers lash down loose plating with steel cables, welders showering sparks as they sealed cracks along the hull. Miriam walked toward him, her arm still bound in a mechanical brace, her face pale with pain. "You should be in recovery," Aaron said. "I recover when they are dead," she answered flatly. He had no reply. The human fleet gathered in the cold expanse beyond Solara Prime. 60 ships, all battered survivors, their hulls scarred, their engines unreliable. They looked less like a navy and more like a fleet of ghosts. Across the void, the Cathari arrived. Aaron's chest tightened as the alien ships slid into formation. Perfect triangles, interlocking geometry, 7 massive warships flanked by dozens of escorts. The sheer symmetry of them was suffocating, as though the void itself bent to their logic. On the bridge, Harrow's voice was steady. "This is it. Disorder against order. Remember, there is no plan, no predictability. The only way to win is to make them drown in our chaos." Aaron's fingers hovered over his console. His heart pounded in his throat. The battle began. The first exchange was slaughter. Alien beams cut through the human lines with terrifying precision, carving ships in half, turning steel into fire. The air on the bridge shook as Resolute reeled from a glancing strike. "Scatter!" Harrow shouted. The fleet dissolved into fragments, ships veering off in directions that made no sense. Some charged headlong into the alien lines, firing until they burned. Others drifted silent, vanishing into the dark, only to erupt in sudden ambushes. Aaron fed chaos into the nav systems, forcing erratic vectors, jerks and lunges that made no tactical sense. Miriam fired in bursts of illogical rhythm, short volleys followed by silence, then frenzied barrages. The Cathari tried to adapt, their formations shifting, proofs recalculating. But the contradictions multiplied too quickly. For every answer they found, humans offered 2 new paradoxes. A corvette ignited its engines and rammed a warship, detonating in a fireball that crippled the alien vessel. A frigate shut down its transponder, drifting dead for 10 minutes, then came alive inside the enemy formation, unleashing a storm of fire before vanishing again. The nebula of Archon had been practice. This was the real test. Even in chaos, death came heavy. Resolute took blow after blow. Consoles exploded, sending shards of glass across the bridge. Smoke filled the air. Crew screamed as fire spread through the corridors. Aaron fought through the haze, every nerve burning, every choice a contradiction. His body felt carved hollow, running only on stubbornness. Beside him, Miriam clung to her console, blood running down her brace. She never stopped firing. Then the moment came. Through the haze of wreckage, Aaron saw it, a warship breaking formation, its hull cracked, its engines sputtering, a wound in the perfect geometry. "Harrow," he shouted. "There." The captain did not hesitate. "All guns fire on that ship." Resolute surged forward, her plasma batteries spitting fury. Other human ships joined, their volleys chaotic, overlapping, nonsensical. The Cathari tried to compensate, to protect the wounded vessel, but their formation faltered. One break became 2, then 3. The elegance shattered. The battle descended into madness. Alien ships fought as individuals, their logic webs failing to reconcile the contradictions. Human vessels swarmed them like wolves, striking and vanishing, erratic and relentless. One by one, the warships fell. The last alien vessel tried to flee, engines burning bright, but a crippled human destroyer latched onto it, dragging them both into a star's gravity well. Their final screams lit the void. Then silence. On the bridge of Resolute, Aaron slumped against his console. His body trembled. His ears rang with the echoes of battle. Around him, the crew sat in stunned silence, unable to process what they had done. Miriam whispered, "Is it over?" Harrow stood at the center, her uniform burned, her face streaked with blood. She stared out at the wreckage of the alien fleet, then turned back to her crew. "It is not over," she said quietly, "but it has begun." The news spread like wildfire across human space. The Cathari had been defeated in open battle, not slowed, not stalled, defeated. The myth of their invincibility was broken. For the first time in the war, humanity was not just surviving, they were fighting back. Aaron stood alone on the observation deck, staring at the drifting wreckage. The stars were quiet now, silent witnesses to the slaughter. He thought of Admiral Vey, of Callan, of every name carved into the void. They had proved the aliens wrong, but at a cost that could never be repaid. Aaron whispered into the silence, "We are still here." And in the emptiness of space, that was enough.